What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Herb Dean responding to McGregor's criticism of the Aldo-Dvashivili fight. This past weekend, UFC legend Jose Aldo shared the octagon with streaking bantamweight prospect Aldo-Dvashivili in what many believe to be a #1 contender fight. Unfortunately for former featherweight kingpin Jose Aldo, he found himself on the wrong side of a unanimous decision after struggling with Dvalishvili's clinch work. After the fight, former champ Conor McGregor took to Twitter to voice his thoughts on the decision, saying that he believed the referees should separate fighters who show little activity in grappling positions sooner. McGregor was quick to follow up with another tweet explaining that while he wasn't a fan of how Aldo-Dvashivili got the win, he respects the Georgian fighter. Now, longtime referee Herb Dean, who served as the man in the middle for the Aldo-Dvashivili fight, has responded to McGregor's criticism. He spoke to Helen Yee this week in an interview to explain that he doesn't necessarily disagree with McGregor's comments, but referees need to keep things consistent.
But there is some truth and something to look at in what he's saying, especially if it's happening again and you see no direction in it. It's something that we all want to look at, but at the same time, it's not something that individuals should just jump out and change on their own. I think to have a consistent sport, the officiating should always be communicated with everyone involved. And
do you agree with McGregor and think MMA officiating needs to change? Is there a case to be made for fighters to be separated sooner? Sound off in the comment section down below. Chael Sonnen believes Colby Covington can get a title fight with Leon Edwards. Following Leon Edwards' spectacular knockout over Kamaru Usman this past Saturday in the main event of UFC 278, many began to wonder how the landscape of the welterweight division had abruptly changed. With the 170-pound title changing hands, new life was breathed into the division as fighters who Usman had already defeated his belt against began to see a path to title contention once more. After much uncertainty regarding when Colby Covington would be able to fight next, UFC President Dana White revealed this week following Dana White's Contender Series that Covington was in good health and the promotion was looking to book him a fight sooner rather than later. Although no word was given on a potential opponent for Covington, former UFC middleweight title challenger Chael Sonnen believes he has the answer to the question so many fight fans have been asking. According to Sonnen, when Covington is ready to return to the octagon, it could very well be against newly crowned champion Leon Edwards. He spoke on the MMA Hour this week to explain that although Edwards vs Usman 3 seems like the obvious fight to be made, it might not be that simple.
I'm not advocating that, but I will tell you that it is very possible. I think that Kamaru Usman is the obvious answer, but there's things that you and I don't know. Like, just by example, we haven't seen how long the commission is going to suspend him. We don't know if there's an injury. Colby Covington is the clearest #1 contender that the sport has.
While the division doesn't have a clear #1 contender, UFC President Dana White has stated previously that the winner of September 10th showdown between Khamzat Chimaev and Nate Diaz will likely be the next man up for a title fight. Do you think Leon Edwards should wait for Kamaru Usman to be ready for a trilogy fight? Or should the newly crowned champ fight another contender such as the winner of Chimaev vs Diaz or Colby Covington? Play matchmaker and give us your thoughts in the comments down below. Kevin Holland announces next opponent. This just in, fan favorite Kevin Holland officially has a date and an opponent for his next UFC fight. After a 2-fight skid at middleweight, Holland returned to the welterweight division earlier this year where he defeated Alex Cowboy Oliveira and Tim Means with back-to-back second-round wins. Now Holland has taken to Instagram to announce that his next fight will take place on the highly anticipated UFC 279 card on September 10th against none other than Daniel Rodriguez. This fight will serve as Rodriguez's return to the octagon after picking up 3 straight wins in 2021 that most recently saw him defeat the Motown phenom Kevin Lee via unanimous decision. Following the win over Lee, Rodriguez has been sidelined for an entire year with a hand injury that kept him from being medically cleared to fight. With the recent addition of Holland Rodriguez to go along with Tony Ferguson vs Li Jingliang, which was announced this past weekend, UFC 279 is looking incredibly stacked. When Trailblazer and D-Rod step into the octagon in September, who do you think leads with the win? Give us your predictions in the comment section below. Next up, Khabib stands behind controversial comments regarding Aldo. Last year, former UFC lightweight champion Khabib Nurmagomedov made headlines for a controversial statement that he made regarding longtime featherweight kingpin Jose Aldo. The Eagle made waves by shutting down talks of Aldo experiencing a career resurgence after dropping to bantamweight, explaining that no fighter can reach their prime twice. Khabib drew parallels by comparing Aldo to his former rival Conor McGregor, who looked incredibly dominant in his knockout victory of Donald Cerrone, but then looked like a shell of his former self against a stronger opponent like Dustin Poirier. After Aldo lost this past week weekend at UFC 278 to Aldo-Dvashivili, a fight that would have likely earned the King of Rio a title shot, Nurmagomedov took the opportunity to double down on his claims from last year. He stated in an interview with Red Corner MMA this week that every fighter simply needs to accept the fact that at a certain point, they just don't have it anymore. No man can reach his prime. That becomes evident when you fight top opposition. Of course, both Aldo and Luke could still beat a lot of good fighters, but look at Merab. He's got 8 wins in a row. He is the kind of opposition that reveals your true level. Although Aldo is without a doubt a fan favorite fighter, many were quick to agree with Nurmagomedov's recent assessment of Aldo's performance from this past weekend. Throughout the fight, the King of Rio simply looked to be a step behind as he found himself unable to find his rhythm in the fight. Following the loss to Dvalishvili, Aldo reportedly informed his opponent that the fight was the final one of his historic career. Do you think Aldo should in fact retire after the loss, or do you think the former 145-pound kingpin should make another run at the bantamweight belt? Give us your thoughts on Aldo and his legendary career down below. And before we continue, make sure you give that like button some love and be sure to subscribe to the MMA Zone for all the latest news. Up next, Leon Edwards' coach recalls tense moments going into the 5th round of Kamaru Usman fight. Going into the 5th round of the UFC 278 main event between Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman, Edwards' corner knew something needed to be done if their fighter had any hope of rewriting the script and leaving Salt Lake City victorious. In what can only be described as something out of a movie, Edwards' corner gave Rocky a motivational speech for the ages. When Edwards knocked welterweight kingpin Kamaru Usman out cold with a perfectly placed head kick, fight fans could not believe their eyes. It wasn't until after the event, however, that footage emerged of David Lavelle, Leon Edwards' head coach, delivering his now legendary speech. Immediately, the clip began to circulate the internet as many credited Lavelle with being the reason Edwards was in the right headspace to deliver such an incredible knockout that late into the fight. In an interview with MMA Junkie this week, Lavelle gave his thoughts on what took place between him and Edwards going into the 5th round, explaining that he knew something drastic had to change if his fighter was going to leave Utah as the welterweight champion.
And I knew I had to do something. His body language, he wouldn't look me in the eye, he was slumping in his chair, he looked dejected. I'm thinking, this is not you, son, what is wrong? So I don't know what it was, call it godly intervention, I don't know, but I had to shake this kid out of this slumber.
As the combination of the cinematic moment between rounds and the highlight reel knockout that followed weren't enough, footage has now come out of Edwards' team pre-fight drilling the exact same kick that slept Usman. As Edwards and his team continue their victory tour, they could very well find themselves in contention for one of ESPN's coveted ESPY awards this year as well. Now, for our breaking news story, we have UFC fighter Dustin Poirier officially announcing his return date on November 12th on the Israel Adesanya vs. Alex Pereira fight card. As of right now, Dustin has not officially announced his opponent, but there is some speculation that it's Michael Chandler. Who do you think will win that fight? Let us know in the comments down below. Last up, Luke Rockhold sends warning to Jake Paul regarding criticism of UFC 278 scrap. This past weekend at UFC 278, former UFC and Strikeforce middleweight champion Luke Rockhold stepped into the octagon for the final time as he squared off against Paulo Costa. The fight was an incredibly entertaining one as both men emptied the gas tanks en route to the judges' scorecards. And although Rockhold broke his nose early on in the fight, the 37-year-old showed an impressive display of heart as he continued to bring the fight to Costa. Following the loss and his subsequent retirement during his post-fight octagon interview, fans were quick to shower Rockhold with praise for the display after his 3-year-long hiatus from the sport. One man who wasn't impressed with the fight, however, was none other than the controversial online personality, Jake Paul. Paul took to Twitter following the fight to call the display put forth by both men embarrassing for the sport, much to the dismay of many fight fans, including Ariel Helwani, who was quick to shut down Paul's comments. This week, Rockhold took the opportunity to fire off a warning at Paul, saying,
"He thinks he's like a f***ing Ali. Shut the f*** up. Go back in your hole before I smack the out of you."
So far, no response yet from Paul, who recently had a scheduled boxing match with Hasim Rahman Jr. canceled just a week before the scheduled bout. With Rockhold now retired from MMA, many fans have begun to call for him to step into the ring with Jake Paul in a scrap that many believe would be a successful night for the former middleweight champion. Would you like to see Rockhold box Jake Paul? Give us your thoughts in the comment section below. Today's video was packed with some juicy stories from the fight world. What are your thoughts about what's going on in the MMA? Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the MMA Zone to see more videos just like this, and see you next time.